Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pokemon Masterclass series. I'm your host, PokéNav, and each episode I bring you experts from across the Pokemon card world to take your knowledge of the TCG to the next level. This week, I have the pleasure of speaking with an absolute legend among Pokemon card collectors and an overall pillar of the community. Please welcome everyone, the number one English Pokemon cards collector, David Persin, aka Uncle Dave. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I was maybe having a rough day, but now that I'm here with you, I just feel like everything is beaming to the upside. So thanks.
Well, as you can see, guys, Dave did not come along. He brought his entire entourage with him. He's got his bodyguards, just in case things get serious here. So he is well protected today with these pokey people.
I appreciate that.
But
I really don't know much about your background, and so I just like to come well buffered, well prepared, to make sure that in case you try anything, and I like to call those the shenanigans, I've got
mhm.
support on this side of the camera.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you did good, man. Judging by the people you got surrounded around you, I won't be pulling anything fishy.
I appreciate that. And let's talk about fish because why not? I know you've got 100 questions, but let's dive right in. I think my understanding is your name is Shad. Am I correct?
That is correct. Yes.
I think you'd want to know something about me, Shad, that has to do with Shad. So let's just get it out on the table right now. So I was a youngster, I don't know, maybe 12, 13 years old. My parents' house backed up to the American River in Sacramento, California. And I went down there and I went shad fishing. All right. You stand on the sideline there, whatever, and you're casting out the rod and you're doing your thing. And eventually I decided to kind of wade in a little bit because I thought that would be a smart thing for a youngster to do when he can't swim, it, that kind of thing. And found myself swept away into the water, panicking, trying to make sure I didn't lose the rod so my dad wouldn't be mad at me, the rod and reel. And I'm floating down the river to my demise when luckily someone came off the sidelines in the bushes, they were in there, came diving into the water and saved me, pulled me into the shore. And I was just so lucky, so blessed, so thankful. And then everyone that was fishing for shad on the shore felt so bad for me. They all came over to the kid and they brought all of their fish to me. So drenched and whatever, I had a wonderful, scary, and rewarding experience that involves both fish and your name. So I just thought I would put that out there so you'd know right from the beginning.
Well, that's awesome. So not only has Shad come up before in saving your life, but hopefully, it will also come up in the context of being able to collaborate with, as I said, the number one English Pokemon cards collector. And thank goodness that you had those people there that day. Otherwise, we may never have this extraordinary collection that you've garnered. And that again, thanks for that story, Dave. That's a great way to kick things off. But for today, really, what I want to get into, first of all, thank you again for being here, for sharing your insight with the community. But really, I want to get into three of the big aspects of the TCG today. One of which being collecting. I think that's a no-brainer. The other being investing, and then the third being business. So I've got a lot of questions. We got a lot to get into. So if you're okay, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. And we'll go ahead and start off with the collecting aspect. So now I've been following you for quite some time. I've been following your journey, especially since you recently came onto YouTube, watching a lot of your videos there. And I know that you began this collection and started this journey by purchasing a couple sets and then by fortuitously acquiring a few collections. And if I'm not mistaken, this was around like the mid 2000s. But if you would, go ahead and take us back to the beginning and give some insight as to what gave you the impetus to start this collection and eventually to, be able to have this title of the number one English Pokemon cards collector.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think we're all individuals and we all have our own unique personality quirks. And so you're dealing with an individual who's sitting here in this interview who's got a lot of things that don't always make sense in the traditional sense. My mind works in mysterious ways, and I always say I let it guide me. I don't try and manipulate it. So I've had a collector's gene inside of me since I was a young child. Collected, baseball cards, had all the top sets of the 1950s, 60s, that kind of thing. Eventually rolled that into a different business years ago. So the collecting gene has always been inside me. When I dumped out of that whole thing due to counterfeiting and robberies and all kinds of things that I'd been through involved in that, it was because I didn't feel the love of collecting anymore. I felt the loss of innocence, steroids, all those things that had come into the sports collecting world. When I jumped back in, I don't have a real reason why. I was just out, a little bit of a shopaholic at times. It comes and goes, never know why. Maybe you get depressed one night and you're sitting there looking to appease. You don't have the chocolate sitting right next to you to grab a bite, so you go for the credit card. I don't know, but that's what I did. I actually was just out on eBay shopping. I saw two sets, and for no reason, with no particular rationale behind it, I bought them. And when I did that, I woke up the next morning feeling tremendously guilty. What did I do? Why did I do it? What was I going to do with two complete sets, having really not had anything else? And the ADHD part of me, the type A personality, like if you're going to go big, you go big, or you go home, go whatever they say. I just said to myself, well, I may as well find out what I have here and how it relates to what is the rest of what is available in the Pokemon collecting hobby. And that got me to start researching and searching on eBay and looking at other listings and trying to figure out what it was I would need to begin to accumulate and buy so I could round out the rest of what I was missing, having only two sets. I had no idea if there was 22 sets or 122 sets at that time. So I started my research part of the journey at that point, and that then led me forward.
So did you have any kind of prior experience or any prior knowledge of the Pokemon TCG other than, maybe a quick glance at a Pikachu on television, or did you just dive into it completely blind to the brand itself?
Yeah, I would say minimal. I was not completely blind because when the cards came out originally in the 99, 98, 99, 2000 timeframe, I did have my children and we did go to some of the stores and we bought some of the packs. And so I opened a few of those and just put them aside. But we had not, and I probably tried to build some base set or those kinds of things. When I look back today, I still have some of those cards. So it looked like I was trying to build some sets, but never really maintained it, got into it seriously. The kids really didn't get into it seriously. So they kind of just went away in a box for those 4 or 5 years. But no, I did not have a continuity. I just had a general exposure to the hobby. And I would say, as far as me as well, I've always been and always will be just a big kid. It just doesn't change in my own mentality. And so sometimes my wife and she'll say to me, how are you still such a big kid? You're supposed to be a grown man. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. So I think that's always underneath all of this as well. The kid part of it is I love these guys. I mean, I love you
Mhm.
guys. I just want you guys. I love you guys. So anyways, so that's just there, and that's a part of it too.
Awesome. And so, as I said, you started out, you got a couple sets, you were able to come across a few collections. Um, but then, how did that kind of unfold into acquiring more products? Were you connecting with other people in the community? Did you, I know you have a little bit of a background in the sports card world. So did you kind of have some resources on that end where you were able to garner products and to continue this collection?
That's a great question. And no one's really asked that to me, which means I haven't really had a chance to think about the nuances of answering your question in an accurate and detailed fashion. So as you ask it, here's what my mind says to me. I was lucky to find success in the research and acquisition process early when I started. If I had not experienced, and I'll explain that in a second, if I had not experienced that success, I probably would not be here today. So what
Hmm.
do I mean? I mean, we were in a slow part of the hobby, as everyone knows. The hobby had kind of, fallen at that point. The demand wasn't there. There was excess supply, those kinds of things. You had some collectors who were disenfranchised in the sense that they didn't figure their collections were going to go anywhere, and Pokemon wasn't going to amount to anything from a longevity standpoint. And so they were selling. I was able to see complete sets. I was able to find Worlds cards. I was able to find trainer decks A and B. I was able to buy booster boxes that were sealed. So very rapidly in that next couple of years, I was able to ramp up all of the sets. Now I owned all 20 or 22 or whatever it was. I began to have success in building out all of these other promo type stuff. And because of that, knowing that I wasn't sitting there feeling like I was involved in a failing endeavor, it motivated me to continue forward. It motivated me to say, okay, you know what you have, and it's pretty remarkable. At that point, in particularly in light of one collection that I bought early on that had some truly one of a kind kinds of things in it. And so with that in the backdrop, amongst everything else I'd acquired, I started to say, this looks like I'm going to be successful doing it. And it was really motivating.
Mhm. Awesome. Now, you've said many times in your videos, and as I said, I keep pretty close tabs on your YouTube channel, which their videos are fantastic.
I appreciate
But
it.
you've
You may be the only one, so I just want to say thank you.
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of people out there that really appreciate the detailed information that you provide, and more of the down to earth approach with that with a little bit of comical humor on the side as well. So I think a lot of people appreciate it, myself included.
Thank you.
But you've said many times in your videos that you've always felt somewhat of an inherent obligation to the community to have the ultimate collection, and that many have come to expect that of you, to have, to expect that David Pearson has the collection. My question to you is, how has this impacted your buying decisions, and what advice would you give to others who have similarly high aspirations for their own collection?
Yeah. I've always felt that obligation. Once I got to a point where I knew that I was in this kind of continued acquisition mode, and I was going to be in that mode going forward. So that involved a decision to personally travel to the World Championships every single year and vie for those cards, talk to the winners directly, and continue along with everything I could fill in to make sure the collection was as comprehensive as possible. I did develop that obligation. It's silly. Who would have that? But that's me. I am the person who worries about what everybody else is thinking. And I wish I didn't, because it does create pressure. But I want to do right by the community. I want to do right by other people. It's just what it is, and it always has been. So that's a part of it. As far as the acquisition decisions, that's interesting, because one of the things that I've talked about in some of my videos are understanding the rarity of what you're looking to acquire. And if it means you have to pay a little bit more for something, if you really want it, if you really need it, if it's really something that's going to bring you a certain satisfaction, you might need to just bite the bullet and buy it then and there when you can. And I've said, along with that comes this adage that my dad always said to me, which is, you never pay for something all the way from nothing. In other words, if you're going to buy a car and it's $30,000, it doesn't cost you $30,000. You don't measure it from 0 to 30. Let me say that a little differently. I'm going to say one way different. You're going to buy a $35,000 car versus a $30,000 car. So the $35,000 car, it doesn't cost you 35, it really costs you 5 more than the 30 you were going to pay. And
Mhm.
so understand that that's not going from 0 to something. And that's what it was for these cards. So I was overpaying in the beginning, had no idea I was overpaying by how much, but I was looking at rarity and trying to say, this might be the one time I could come up with Jason Klasinski's card. He was willing to sell it or whatever, and I had a chance to buy it. So if it costs me 2,000 more dollars, go ahead and grab it and figure out a way to continue to make money as I go on through life to be able to fund it over the course of time. So that has made a difference. And I've actually had people come to me after my videos and say they've done that and they've been so happy that, and I'm not talking about getting ripped off either, just, randomly pay anything and everything, but strategically understand, don't let a few dollars or $1,000 for a one of a kind card get in the way, because you'll regret it forever instead of figuring out how to pay for it over the next year or so.
Hmm. No, I can totally understand that. It's really the quality over the quantity, and something that I've um, reverberated on my channel as well is, and I've heard it among other big name collectors as well. You're probably familiar with Scott Pratt, who has said the same thing. If there's something that you really want, or something that you think has a lot of inherent value to it, don't get caught up on the cents or the dollars. If you have to pay that premium on something that you truly believe in, then do it, because in the long run it will certainly pay off. And just kind of going along with that, Dave, what else, what other advice would you give to others who are wanting to go down this path? Now, I don't know that everyone aspires to be, the number one English Pokemon cards collector in the world. But if they do have high aspirations for their collection, what are some of the other strategies, things that you've learned along the way that you think would help them in their journey as well?
So a couple things come to mind. I think one that's important always is patience. I have not been particularly good with that one due to that obligatory factor lying underneath everything I do. But I do think as I find that I chase the more rare cards, and when I mean more rare cards, I'm talking about little variants that might be 30, 40, $50 each.
Hmm.
Believe me, I'll never see them again. Somehow they always appear. There's, one that pops out there from a DVD from years ago that's still in its seal and it's out there for sale, and it allows me to fill a hole in the collection. So patience is important, because without it, you believe that they don't pop out, and you either overpay or you stop looking one way or the other. Use those eBay searches, those saved searches, as ways to locate things in general. Always have those available and on, so that the informational flow is always flowing in your direction. I think that's critically important. Um, I think you have to segregate. Another part of something that came to my mind when you asked the question was, and it goes to the nature of this conversation in general, is I've always been a collector. I've never been an investor. And let me say that again. I've never started from this being an investment. Never
Hmm.
was a piece of it, never had anything to do with it. So I think that's important, because so much of this community right now has turned on to the investment side.
Hmm.
And it's fueling it, and it's creating a situation where some people are worried it will not hold value once those people, and if those people eventually leave. So when I paid for something, it was really because I wanted it or needed it, not because it was going to be of value necessarily. And folks like Scott Pratt, they're less the collector vibe, which is, again, this is just a fact. It's not a commentary, but they're
Hmm.
more onto the investment side. And I think that can be a part of it as well. And I certainly have an investment side of what I do now. But from the collection, you have to do what you love. You have to be fueled by your passion. You have to be fueled by whatever it is enamors you and what you collect. I've got great friends that collect only Pikachus, and great friends that collect only Gengars, and great friends that collect only reverse hollows. And, so it's just kind of what suits your fancy. Um, and that allows you, I think, to be happy with almost every decision you make. Because it doesn't necessarily have a corresponding cost involved, and cost analysis valuation type of thing going on that's going to maybe
Hmm.
make you feel you didn't do a good job later.
Hmm. And that's interesting, because what I've said before is just the opposite of yourself. When I initially got back into the hobby around 2016, and we'll get to this in a second, but at the time I was practicing financial advisor, And I started to see that these products were still available, especially a lot of the old Watsy stuff, which I had no idea. And it really amazed me that they were still around. And to me, I saw it as an investment opportunity, really more or less just from a supply and demand standpoint. I couldn't have imagined that there was much of this still out there. Uh, but what I'm getting at is that for me, what I've told a lot of people is I got into it as an investor so that I could build up capital so that I could then reinvest that back into my collection. Because much like you, I think at the heart of most of us, we're collectors. Whether you do have an investment piece of what you're doing within the hobby, I think at our core, we are collectors. So I agree with you in the sense that I think there's a lot of people coming in that are strictly looking at it from a monetary standpoint and just trying to maybe take advantage of the popularity. But I think that there are also a lot of people that do find true enjoyment in the hobby and can really benefit from both aspects, both from the investing side as well as the collecting side. Because I know for myself, that's something that I've attempted to pursue and am still doing, is investing with the purpose of reinvesting back into my collection.
Yeah, I mean, if you can do that successfully, that's a fantastic part of this hobby and a fantastic thing that's actually available to people. And I actually do know folks that do that all the time. I think it takes, one of the lessons I learned from the sports card business that I was in years ago was capital was so critical, and you alluded to that. And the problem was when I tried to do both, when I tried to maintain my sports card collections but I was making money in the business, there was no reason for me to maintain the collection anymore because I was giving up business opportunities from
Mhm,
a profitability standpoint.
mhm,
And I was not able to do both successfully. As I've matured, gotten older, and put a little bit of money in the bank, I've gotten more capital resources to be able to do both a bit more successfully. But I think it really is a tough balancing act. And I think that's why you see people sometimes try it for a while and then they end up maybe having to sell their whole collection, or they end up bailing out if they're not as strategically inclined or successful in whatever plan they were looking to execute. When you
mhm,
yourself comes from a financial advisor background, you of course know that I do that for a living as well.
mhm,
That you've got a little bit of a leg up in just maybe understanding money, and so that's a true benefit. And there's people that are very aggressive even without that background. They get wholesaler type of relationships going, and they're buying stuff at wholesale to sell on retail, and then they take those profits and use them to buy into their collection. So yeah, there's a little bit more choice in how you can go about possibly making some profits in this business. But I think it truly is a tough balancing act to find out
mhm.
which way you're to really show. Are you a collector or investor? Or if you had to pick one, what would you ultimately pick? Yeah.
For myself, I mean, like I said, I think at my core, I am a collector. But I've heard many people say that it's really tough. That they think that the hardest aspect is being an investor because they actually want to add to their collection. They don't want to sell products because they want to keep it for themselves. And I found the exact opposite. I found that it's more difficult to be a collector, and I think as you alluded to, it's more difficult when you have a financial background, because when you do have that leg up, it's a benefit, but it can also kind of be a disadvantage because you see the opportunities when they're presented. And as you said, when you see that, your first inkling is to try to capitalize on that opportunity, instead of maybe just holding on to that product for yourself and keeping it as a keepsake for yourself and perhaps for generations to come. So I would say at my core, I'm a collector, but as you said, it is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, and I'm constantly at odds with myself with most purchasing decisions of trying to delineate between the two. and hold true to that collector's mindset.
Yeah, and I think it's most important that you just know yourself, right? We'd always say,
Hmm.
if you want to identify or you want to fix a problem, by the way, yours are not problems, but if you want to fix it, you've got to at least be able to identify it. So if you're going to come up with the best plan of execution for how to balance the two, you've got to kind of see where your mind leans and then be able to battle that a little bit. But one of the most incredible examples is Pokemon King Gary, right? And
Hmm.
if you look at what he's got, it's mainly Charizards. From what I mean, he's got everything. Of course, he's got tons and tons of everything. But the visibility of his collection is around these millions and millions of dollars of Charizards. Well, to me, and that's his collection. He loves that. That's what he collects. But I didn't ever do that. I didn't go after, multiples of something because of the value in there. And had I done that, I would be sitting with a lot more value to my collection, um, because it just makes sense. If everybody wants Charizards and they all want tens, well, the more you have, the better off you're going to be. So
Hmm.
I have a collection that is exactly what it is, trying to get one of everything ever produced in the English Pokemon collecting, card collecting hobby. Um, and I did it with the Ion collection. And so because of that, I probably paid a price from the investment standpoint. And that's okay for me. Maybe just so I can sleep at night, I rationalize that because I don't want to feel sad. Kind of want to be jealous of Gary. But it is what I focused on and why I'm happy where I am right now and don't second guess myself with, oh my goodness, I didn't grade the cards and I should have got rid of that for a 10 instead of an 8 and those kinds of things.
Hmm.
I'm okay with where I'm at in the collecting journey.
Right, right. And I think a lot of that boils down to, you've got this financial background. You understand how to have a security net for your financial foundation, and so you're okay with taking a little more risk, or maybe missing out on those value situations, because you're not in a position where you feel like you have to build value in order to maintain your current status, or where you're at. So
Right.
that totally makes sense. So we're starting to roll into more of the investment aspect, but I think the community would probably kill me if I didn't ask this question, because I know it's on many people's minds. Um, how close are you to having a complete collection up to this point?
Yeah. And I'll give you credit. First one that's ever asked that in all the interviews. So I appreciate the question because it definitely is what motivates me going forward. Uh, I'd say I'm pretty close. I certainly have all of the I have every trophy card, so that's one of the tougher ones to get. Every first, second, third, and/or fourth place trophy card from the beginning 2004 to 2019, the last year, albeit I'm missing the 2019 number 4.
Mm,
So that I'm missing one card there. I certainly have every finalist, champion, every top 32, 16, all of those for all of the years. That's complete. I have all of the promo cards now, so the black, whites, DPs. And when I say that, all of the variants of those as well.
mhm,
I just had come in 2 days ago, one of the cards I thought I would never see, which was you'll say, David, well, that's got to be rare. Haha, funny. It was a Keldeo. I think it's a black, white BW number 60 or something, or 64.
mhm,
And it came from a DVD. And so, it's a non hollow version that who would ever think that there'd still be out there, these non-hollow versions of a hollow card. So down to those
mhm,
kinds of cards, I might be missing one or two in all of the promo series. I think for the most part, I'm not though. Uh,
mhm,
and then, the only ones that I would say that I'm missing now fall into one of two categories. There's a couple of tin hollows that you can't tell them apart. So there's some hollows that they list on Bulbapedia or whatever that you look and you say it's a water web based hollow thing. But if you want to try to look at a card and tell you what is the water web based hollow look of a card, you won't know. So
mhm,
nobody will. I don't know. So there's very difficult to actually determine what it is. And then
mhm,
finally, I'm missing maybe a couple of cards that are international or European championships that are actually in some form of English. I'm not looking for the ultra bolas or things that are in German, those kinds of things. I'm looking just
Hmm.
straight for English cards. So with
Hmm.
the progress this last year in finishing all of the base set fourth print holo cards, with the progress in finishing all of the third print fossil, that's called the red logo cards, including all of the rares and the holo. Well, there's no holos, but the rares. I would say I'm down to maybe 5 or 10 cards at the most now, uh,
Wow.
in all of that
Wow.
to complete it all. So yeah, it's
That's
been a
amazing.
good year. So yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that were wondering this very question, and I had no idea that you were also collecting the variants as well. So that makes it even that much more impressive that you do, that you are looking for all of these variants on top of that. It's absolutely amazing, and it's really mind-boggling. And I guess just to follow up with that question, do you have any kind of strategy that you use to keep track of this collection, or is it just, you've been doing it for so long? Is it just basically all up here, and you're very familiar with, what you've gotten up to this point and what's left?
Yeah, this last year has been, one of the things that people ask me is why now? Why did you kind of come out of the woodwork at this point? And that was the pandemic. That was
Hmm.
the chance to be more around the house than into the work environment and find things that I'd not been able to do, get to them and get to them more successfully. So I've spent a lot of time in this last year doing everything from recataloging all of the sets, finding what I was missing, acquiring cards I was missing, going to bat to try to find those rare cards, doing some large scale, I call them almost three team trades, where I'll trade
Hmm.
something, he'll trade something for something, and then someone else will trade back to me what I'm looking for. So to get all the cards, and then I put everything on spreadsheets. So I finally got every set on a spreadsheet with how many cards, how many master variants, how many I was missing, what cards I was missing. I certainly got my website built, on the other side, the business side, which I know we'll get to. So,
Hmm.
so all of the different things I now have in a position that I can actually look between books I've written in or spreadsheets I've developed to find out exactly what I'm missing and continue to put the feelers out there or keep an eye on things as they come available.
Hmm. No, I can imagine. I can imagine. We'll see. There you go, guys. Dave Pearson, he is not a human calculator or a human Excel spreadsheet. He does have to put it into some type of program. You heard it here. All right, Dave. So let's go ahead and move on here to the investing aspect of it. Now, I know we discussed it a little bit here, and you had mentioned, your background. You are a current practicing financial advisor. From what I understand, you've been doing that for about the last 20 years. So you got a strong financial background, strong investment management background. One of the things that I have noticed about the pandemic and that I've seen across all markets, whether it's the securities industry, whether we're looking at real estate, whether we're looking at collectibles, it has really revealed the necessity of diversification of one's assets across different asset classes. So, from your perspective, do you see Pokemon as a viable alternative investment class among someone's overall investment portfolio?
So you, I think talking to our audience today, because I know you know the answer to this, the collectibles industry, in whatever way you want to couch it or talk about it, of which Pokemon card collecting fits in, is deemed a portion of what we would call alternative investments,
Mhm.
some type of alternative investments. And when you talk about general strategic portfolio building, you're going to have something in stocks and bonds. You're going to have something in cash. Well, I should separate those: stocks, something in bonds or fixed income, something in cash available for emergencies, necessities, and then you've got your box or your holding tank of alternative investments. And that shouldn't comprise for most people more than 5 to 10% of their overall bucket of investments. So could this fall into that? 100%, of course. Especially if you can develop an expertise for how to make money in doing this.
Hmm.
The harder part is, so if I said, well, we're going to go buy, some currencies, or we're going to go buy some, gosh, I haven't done alternative investments in so long because, well, gold or whatever, precious metals,
Hmm.
um, this is just a different alternative to something that you hope doesn't necessarily correlate or mean move in correlation with the stock markets, that it can kind of move on its own.
Hmm.
So I do think it can serve that purpose. I do think it's critical that there's so many new people coming in that are not necessarily focused on what they should be buying, and maybe buying the best stuff and understanding the risks of what they're buying, or just thinking it's automatically going to go up. I
Hmm.
worry about that quite a bit. But I think if you're strategic in what you're buying, and you understand a longer term, and you look for what people are potentially going to look to buy back from you down the road, that yeah, it can certainly serve a purpose in an investment portfolio for sure. Now, I should caveat one thing, just because if one of my people at my work watch this, why they won't, but I have to say something if they would. For all those out there in compliance that are watching, please understand that I'm speaking to Mr. Shad and PokéNav in my professional capacity as a Pokemon collector and an investor, and not in my professional capacity as a financial advisor. Okay.
Mr. Person is giving education, folks. He is giving education, not advice.
Yes.
Very, very important to
What's your
differentiate those two.
yeah.
The other question that I have, piggybacking off of that, is, obviously Pokemon can be an alternative asset. It can be looked at as an alternative asset. But for other asset classes, we've got analyses we can use. We've got some kind of benchmark that we can measure within those asset classes. Do you think that Pokemon can get to a point, or do you think it's at a point now where we've got enough data, enough analyses done on the hobby that we can confidently, proclaim it as an alternative investment?
So I think there's a bit of a line you have to draw there. One is the data available? I think yes, it clearly is. Has it been quantified and compiled and put together in a way that the bulk of folks can come and use it to any real extent? Not really.
Hmm.
You've got some people that are trying to do that. I see them saying, well, these are the boxes that have appreciated them this much, and you've got folks that analyze the auctions week to week. But do we have 1, 3, 5, 10-year trend analyses and price analyses and that kind of stuff? We do not yet. I'm sure that just because of the nature of innovation and entrepreneurship, there's folks that are probably out there trying to do that. So I think that it becomes really imperative for folks that are going to look to do something to be able and willing to build that data on their own. Um,
Hmm.
because a lot of that data, a lot of the surge in pricing has happened more in the last year or so, maybe
Hmm.
year or two. And people wonder, is that pandemic related because more people are at home and more focused on the collection? Nobody really talks about but I think this is critically important. I was working with my son. I did a video on, one of his projects to talk about Pokemon card collecting and stuff, and realize that you're talking about the number one franchise from a monetization standpoint in the world in Pokemon, over all others, over Star Wars, over Harry Potter, so over Disney. So
Hmm.
basically, when you think about that, now you've got a 25th anniversary coming up. So there's some doomsdayers that have produced videos recently that say that once the pandemic subsides, there will be a complete fall off in demand. I don't think that's the case. I do think they'll see some recovery or decrease in values of some products, not others. But there's such a diversity of confluence of factors that are going on right now that you can't just peg down to one. Some are very positive for the hobby, some are less than positive, and while the data is out there, it probably has not been compiled to a way that people can really rely on it totally successfully just yet.
Yeah, just keep an eye out, guys. Wink, wink. I think that there are things coming down the pipeline, and actually some things that I've been working with others on that. Because for me, one of my main goals, if I provide anything to this hobby, it's to try to, to try to provide some kind of foundation moving forward, because you've got, early adopters like yourself, King Pokemon, people who have been in the hobby for a long time, who we can garner a lot of knowledge from. But really, I truly believe that we're in the infancy of this hobby right now. And I think it really, truly matters what we do now, and the information that we put out there. That will lend to its long-term viability, in my opinion. So that's really been one of my goals, is to try to provide education, both from myself as well as folks like you, and really be able to build that those data points, to build that financial foundation that people can confidently use going into the future. So I think it's in the works, and it's, as I said, it's because of people like yourself, that we're able to even be able to attempt this. So I think
That's
a lot of
I
people
think
appreciate that.
it's fantastic, and I appreciate the kind words, but I agree with you completely. I think folks like you have to be the hobby needs folks like you um, who are motivated to basically create that transition. And we are in the infancy. If you look at hobbies that, baseball cards or something that 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. I mean, you're talking about,
Mhm.
and we're talking here 25. So there's lots of variables. There's supply, there's demand, there's oversupply. There's what does the Pokemon company want to do or not want to do, as far as trying to be involved in secondary markets or not secondary markets, and maybe
Mhm.
not, but I think that when you've got people that have expertise and can help people navigate it successfully, it really makes for something that's better for everyone involved. So that's good.
Mhm.
That's glad you're involved in that.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that. And no pun intended there, right? Of navigating it.
Yes, I'm not a punny guy. Don't worry about me. No.
No, no, of course not. Of course not. So the next question that I have for you here, relating to the investment side, is what recommendations would you give someone who is looking to add Pokemon to their overall portfolio, if it's something that they're considering? Having this financial background, being an advisor. Obviously, we don't want to give individual advice here, but just in general, if someone is considering adding this and seriously incorporating it into their overall asset or their overall portfolio, what would you recommend?
Yeah. So I always wonder when I do this, if I'm a little bit biased in one direction, and so I'll question that of myself before I even say anything to you. I'm not a person that grades cards right now. I have nothing
Hmm.
against grading. I understand all the reasons why people do grade, and I have an understanding of why they don't as well. So I have always felt, though, from what people have said to me and what I've learned myself, that the sealed product is the best investment that you can make, generally speaking. We could caveat and we could say, well, let's not forget about all those Charizards. So, maybe Charizard has this special place sitting out there that we have to go and kind of evaluate it separately.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, I believe that because sealed product over the course of time disappears, the more you open, the more it disappears. Whereas potentially with grading, the more you open, the more something can be submitted, the more it could get resubmitted, the more it could end up with 5 or 10 or 15 or 25 more of a card. That I would be leaning from an investment standpoint towards sealed product. Now, with
Hmm.
respect to sealed product, because I think there's a lot of people that gravitate to elite trainer boxes and collection boxes and those kinds of things, I would say if there are booster boxes available, that's where you want to stay. That's where you want to focus. If there are sets like Champions Path and Hidden Fates and Shining Fates, and you don't have boxes available, then the next best thing tends to be the elite trainer boxes from an investment standpoint. Again, I'm creating only generalities here. If you want to take it down another level, you talked about diversification. I've done videos before that say, don't try to overbuy Try to buy a box or a case of everything that comes out, because you
Right.
never know what's going to end up going on later on as far as supply and whatever. There were people that would take that a step further and say, hey, try to figure out if it has a Charizard in the set. And if it has Charizards in the set, then that's the one to focus on more than a different one. Focus more there. If it's got certain, this new one, Vivid Voltage, has a Pikachu and some, I guess, some other stuff going to replicate the Japanese, some of the battle stuff. So maybe there's where you might focus some more versus a Sword and Shield based, if we're talking modern stuff, versus the
Hmm.
couple of early sets that didn't have Charizards in them. So you could quantify down into the actual contents as soon as you know them. Sometimes you're trying to buy early enough where you don't necessarily know what's in them, and you just take that shot at buying a few boxes or a case. I think the other thing that's interesting is you don't have to worry about buying sealed cases for the smaller investors, because for the most part, the boxes won't be sold in case form. They'll be sold in box form. There's not as much done in case form. So you don't have to feel like you've got to push to buy the sealed cases as long as you're buying from a reputable source. But that's where I'd focus. Then you'd have people, I'm being long winded, but then people would say, well, David, what about the old stuff? Shouldn't you go back to WotC days? And shouldn't you go back to the Diamond and Pearl or whatever Black and White series? You can. But again, there's some heavy increases that have already gone on in those years and in those products. And so it might be argued that you're going to have less of a chance to kind of start in a lower point and move from there. And then, of course, the further you go back now, the more you have to worry about, unfortunately, with the hobby is the tampering. So, the more expensive the boxes are, you really have to be careful of the sources from which you're buying, because as I found in baseball cards, and as we've all seen in the hobby now, the tampering has started, and it's happened, as is some of the counterfeiting as well.
Hmm.
So that's what I'd say. I'll add one last thing to your conversation. There is to my conversation answer to your question. There's no substitute for time and effort in building expertise. So you can sit there and sit on eBay and you can buy anything that's a good investment if you can find it. So that can be the individual cards, that can be the promos, that can be collection boxes, that can be boxes, graded, ungraded. The point is that you're going to go through ups and downs when people aren't selling and are selling. There's going to be people out there that are more willing to make deals because they just need money. You just have to find
Hmm.
it. There's people who list things on eBay, they don't list them very well. So that it has a Charizard in something. I'm making this up as a complete example, but they didn't put Charizard in the title and people just didn't see that it was out there. Can you
Hmm.
find those? Can you search for those? Can you, really hone in onto something that you're looking for and be looking at it day after day and start to identify anomalies where something just isn't pricing the way something else is? And because
Hmm.
buyers are always right in that environment, if you buy something and it's counterfeit or it's not the condition described, you can basically return it. Pretty straightforward and simple. So there's
Hmm.
not a lot to lose in folks trying to buy anything that they find that they feel like is selling at a discount to what its intrinsic value should be.
Hmm. Hmm. No, I totally agree with you, and we're definitely going to get to the eBay side here when we get into the business discussion, because you've had some wonderful videos on selling on eBay, which I know a lot of people will be interested in. I did want to comment on the the modern and the vintage products, and investing in those. I totally agree with you. I think that sealed products is probably the best way to go, in my opinion, as well. I think that's now, granted, as you said, we run the risk of fake products, especially when you go back to WotC, resealed products. But the thing that not a lot of people realize is that with modern, especially if you're buying a newly released set, and let's say that you're getting it at a wholesale price, well, you're getting it at a discount to MSRP typically. If 3 years from now, if let's say Pokemon goes through another slump or goes through, we'll call it a Pokemon recession, um, that product can only hit a certain floor. So it will more than likely just come back down to MSRP. Whereas if you're purchasing into a WotC era product, let's say that you're buying a oh, I don't know, a base set 2 booster box for 15,000, we go through that same type of recession. Well, you may have bought in at 15,000 and then the booster box then is selling at 5,000. So I think that it's something that I haven't heard talked about very much. I think a lot of people have placed a significant emphasis on Wizards of the Coast products because that's where they've seen the tremendous surge. But as you just said, I think that modern and ultra modern is a good opportunity as well. It's just a matter of getting in when those products are released and then waiting that 3, 4, 5 year time horizon before you actually turn around and can sell those products at a premium. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think that a lot of people try to measure successful investing based on what someone else has done. And I think that
Hmm.
makes no sense. So I've always had a rule. It's a dumb rule. It's just what I always had. I'd say if I could buy something and get a reasonable level of return on that something over some course of time, I'd be happy. It would be 30%, let's say. So if I could buy
Hmm.
something, buy a box at 100 and sell it for 130, out net of fees and everything, I'd be happy. Let's say that was a 2 year deal or whatever, maybe a 3 year deal. That's 10% a
Hmm.
year. It's hard to get
Hmm.
10% a year in the stock markets unless we're in this bull market that never ends right now, but in
Hmm.
typical stock market time. So I think that you're right. There's an absolute, you can look at the most overproduced sets that have nothing in them of recent times, whether or not it's things that Fates Collide or Furious Fists or crazy things. And, they've gone down as low as 70 a box, 75 at some point, Steam Siege, but they're
Hmm.
not, now they're back up to 100 again. Now they're moving up even those ones that had more supply and than demand would ever seem to exhaust. And so you're right.
Hmm.
There's more of an inherent floor and a much more of a safety valve. And you look at making your 30, 40, 50%, that's a lot of return over 3, 4, 5 years and be happy with it. And instead of trying to take the one that's going to go from 10,000 to $20,000 with the potential it's going to come crashing down as well. So
Exactly.
I agree with
Exactly. Well, and especially when you take into consideration that, over the last 20 years, the S&P has returned what about 6%. That's I think people have to definitely rein in their expectations and understand this balance of risk versus reward. And again, I think that's where these type of conversations are so important because most of the people jumping into this hobby and especially getting into this aspect of investing, they don't have that background and are only seeing these crazy surges in price and these crazy prices that we've seen over the course of 2020.
you.
So along with that, I guess the next best question would be, what products do you think, and I know you probably get this question a lot, but what products do you think are currently being overlooked by the overall market? And what products do you think are maybe overvalued as things currently stand?
So I don't get that question a lot. So continue to pride yourself on stumping Uncle Dave. I appreciate that. Looks like Uncle Dave's going to be doing a little bit of imbibing tonight to deal with all of the things he should have answered better. But I don't think of much as overvalued. So I should say that right up front.
Mhm.
If I'm going to talk overvalued in general, I'm going to go back to the older boxes. Um, uh, the Watsy boxes and some of the stuff that's still in the several thousands of dollars has gone up to now, Heart and Gold, Soul Silver, all that kind of stuff. And I'm only going to say it's potentially overvalued, and this is really a nuanced answer, but because no one's selling it,
Mhm.
everyone is hoarding whatever there is of it that's out there. It's just being hoarded. It's being put away because whoever owns it is afraid of selling it too cheap because
Mhm.
of this continued surge. So there's no very accurate way to really know how much of the stuff is out there relative to the demand that would be for it from a supply standpoint. I just feel like there's this kind of, what do they call those holes in space? There's this
The
black
black
hole,
hole.
yeah, that's out there that's this vortex or something that you have no way to get your hand into or your head into to figure it out. So those might potentially be overvalued, but by the same token, people are paying the prices. There are
Hmm.
$20,000 boxes that are selling for $20,000, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
I think everything in between is still developing its value, and because people look at other prices to figure out what they're going to sell at and look at completed listings, there's an inherent accuracy in that as well. So I just don't see a lot of overvalue um, in that stuff. Are you know the individual graded cards? There's been a pullback to some degree. I
Hmm.
bought some of the base set fourth print hollows that I
Hmm.
know had gone up strongly because of the Logan Paul videos, and some of that I've seen pull back now to a certain degree. So it could be argued that some of that was overvalued for a bit, but that's same to pull back as well. So I just don't think with as many new buyers that are kind of plunging in, and I mean, be very honest, I've had people come to me with thousands of dollars of cash and say, please, I've got $20,000. I want to buy this, that, or next from you. What's happening there? Okay. That's rolling money from other industries and other places. So there's money kind of coming from everywhere with the new kind of popularity and exposure that Logan Paul and some of those other guys have brought, even if temporary. As
Hmm.
far as undervalued, again, I'm with the same thing as you. I might look towards the more modern stuff because you see it. You saw it happen with Evolutions. Now Evolutions got a boost all of a sudden overnight again because it's the cheaper guys or gals version of base set
Hmm.
kind of thing. And now they're talking about the new maybe 25th anniversary stuff to be replicas again. So I do think that you can look at some of that, but I would still stick with the maybe something like Darkness Ablaze. That would be something that you can still get those boxes for 110, 115. And with the Charizard in it, like Burning Shadows was a few years ago. Um,
Hmm.
I saw a surge in that after a bit of time, after a couple of years, because that was a Charizard set. So um, I might look at that. I think if you get reprints like on Hidden Fates, things like that, there's been recently. I think Hidden Fates is going to end up being one of the most popular sets of all time. Uh, it's just amazing in every respect. Uh, so,
Hmm.
um, so that would be another place that if you can get some of those reprint prices where it fell a little bit, people might be happy with that over time. But yeah, I don't. My focus is not so much. I'm more buying the new stuff and putting it away. I'll put away 5 or 6 cases of Vivid Voltage. I'll put away 10 cases of Darkness Ablaze. Those kinds of things, just in case. But I'm not really. I'm trying to stay diversified as well.
Hmm.
Just to be safe. Just to be safe. Yeah.
Hmm. No, that makes sense. Going back to the over valued standpoint, and going back to our discussion on hoarding product, talking about like the Heart Gold, Soul Silver era, where you think a lot of those are being hoarded right now, and that's why they're not coming onto the open market. Do you feel that modern runs the same risk here of people just hoarding massive quantities of newly released products with the hopes that they will see the same type of resurgence that we've seen with Wizards of the Coast? I know that for me personally, I've witnessed, other sealed collector forums, sealed collector pages on Facebook where I have seen massive, massive quantities of modern and ultra modern products being hoarded. Do you fear that at all, as far as maybe the long term potential of these products if so many people are holding on to them?
So the one thing that's interesting about that question is I think that people that enter and are new to the hobby and are new to the investment side may have that desire to hoard. And you actually have that capability, especially if you can buy from wholesalers, you can buy from
Hmm.
the big retailers. But the problem is because Pokemon is issuing so many sets every single year, 3, 4, 5, depending on what they're doing, certainly about 4 sets a year, your capital really begins to wane very quickly. And
Hmm.
so it's not as easy. When I said some of the folks will come to me and say, hey, you really want to buy these cases? Okay, so give me 20 cases. Okay, so I put it away. Then they come to me, you really want to buy these cases? Okay, at some point you go, no, I
Yeah.
I can't store them. I don't want to spend another 5,000 or $10,000 or whatever it is. It's too much. There's too much. There's too much. So
Hmm.
I think you could find pockets of that being the case where some people have put some away in hopes that that set they put away is going to work in the long run. But I don't think it's going to have a tremendous impact because people are going to figure out very quickly it's just not something, unless you're one of the biggest folks in the industry, even the biggest folks, the collectors, cashes, and the trolls and toads, and the Dave and Adams and those guys, blowout cards. They don't hoard anything. They just
Hmm.
can't. If they, as business folks, they've got to turn the capital to buy the next thing coming.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's going to be huge. And I also think that people that are strategic enough to do that are usually the ones that are smart enough to know that you can't come and dump it all on the market at once because you're going to hurt yourself. So you'll just every once in a while put a case out, put a box out,
Hmm.
etc. You aren't going to shoot yourself in the foot by just trying to throw it all on the market. It would take a real desperate situation to make that happen. So
Right.
hoarding. So I'm really answering just your question about hoarding. Is there a lot of supply of a lot of new stuff? And do you need to be worried about, 2 years later, Pokemon's reissue the same cases again? They're doing that. So you really have to set your time frame as maybe not 2 or 3 years, maybe it's 5 years. If you're
Hmm.
going to put something away with that in mind, just to be careful with the unknowns of the releasing of additional stuff that's been printed and not released by Pokemon itself.
Hmm. Hmm. No, I totally agree, and I usually like to give folks a general time horizon on products, and yours is actually a little bit more conservative than mine. I typically give a time horizon of about 10 plus years on modern and ultra modern products. I consider those long-term investments. And as in the financial world, anything more than 5 plus years, we consider a long-term investment. But here I would say it's a long term investment. But I agree with you. I think, and you and I both know that if the market does go through a downturn or another retrace, that many of the people that do have these large stocks of product, a lot of them will probably be the first ones to try to dump it on the market as quickly as they can. And so you won't have that large quantity in under one household.
Yeah, and the funny part about that is I don't think any of us really know, you know, because
Hmm.
you because it's just not out there. It could also be the case that there's been so much demand in this last year and so many boxes were sold that so much stuff has disappeared and there wasn't a huge quantity relative to the new amount of folks in the hobby that there isn't very much out there. We
Hmm.
just don't know. And it's
Hmm.
really hard when you don't know because the listings aren't out there and the sales aren't out there to support. But
Yeah.
so it's we're all kind of finding out through this surge together what it's going to end up looking like when we're done. But
Hmm.
interestingly, when you talk about compiling data, and you said it, Chad, I didn't say it. You said, wink, wink, here's what's coming. Um, the 5 plus years so far, I'm not going, I'm going purely on intuition alone here. So I could be
Hmm.
100% wrong, and it wouldn't be the first time Uncle Dave was 100% wrong. I would say 5 plus years so far to date has been accurate as far as when you typically are going to see surge in product, you've seen it. I'm not saying you wouldn't see a lot more. I'm saying
Hmm.
that nothing after 5 years, most things that are going to move have really started to move
Hmm.
so far to date. Even the very slow things, from 5 years ago that are now like evolutions or whatever that all of a
Right.
sudden took off and went from nothing to something. So, but
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
course, 10 plus years is a smarter way to look at things because the more conservative you are, you're taking kind of worst case scenarios rather than best case scenarios and relying on those to formulate your decisions. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely, definitely. And mentioning evolutions, it's funny because I caught a lot of flack in the beginning. When I first started on YouTube, I was a big proponent of evolutions. I really saw that it had a lot of good characteristics going for it. As refer to it, it's kind of the poor man's base set. And as I saw the steady increase in easy Pikachu, I know you're probably not a fan of evolutions. Don't take it out on me. But I saw the surge in prices going from base set, and I really saw it as a hierarchy being, you know, first edition base set getting priced out for most people. Then you got shadowless priced out for most people, unlimited, and then even Japanese. I would say Japanese would probably fall right below unlimited in that echelon. And so a lot of the people that were coming into the hobby that still wanted to relive that nostalgia, well, the next best thing, the most affordable thing, was evolutions. And we've gotten to a point now where it's well out of competitive rotation, especially now that we've got limited manpower, limited printing power. I don't believe Pokemon is going to go back and put those printers to use printing evolutions, especially when you've got the 25th anniversary. And in my opinion, I think they're going to focus more on Generation 2 for this. I think we're going to get a Generation 2 evolutions-esque type of set. So that's where I was a big proponent, because I saw a lot of these factors working in the direction of evolutions, and and I caught a lot of flack from people saying, well, it's so overprinted, it's still out there, it'll never go up. And we've seen that. Just as you said, we've hit about that 5-year time horizon. And over the course of 2020, I mean, last I checked, I was buying booster boxes of and cases of evolutions at the beginning of 2020 for basically MSRP $100. Last I checked, it is getting over $700 now. So I think that that really lends credence to our conversation in waiting that time horizon to really see any kind of profit or something that people would be comfortable in selling at.
And one of the things that I really admire the fact that you had the wherewithal and the intellectual ability and willingness to put an argument out there for a product and why it would do well. And I had a few people that were talking to me as I've entered the community and made a few friends about, in a similar vein, how they thought evolutions would do very well. And because
Mhm.
of that, I was sort of able to get in. I saw people coming to my website and asking for evolutions packs, and you start to get that hint of things moving in a certain direction. But one of the things I've always been a proponent of is for people not to listen to everyone else. So I don't mean that they shouldn't listen to you, but I mean, don't just follow the herd mentality. Look at the data yourself, think about things yourself, make your own argument for something. And who knows, it might be very accurate, and you might be able to rely on it for successful investment results down the road as well. But folks like you that did that are hugely important, because it I mean, you winked earlier, but I said that again, but you could have a financial newsletter out there that people could be subscribing to, right? And saying,
Mhm.
hey, here's what we think, no different than these, what are they called? The pantheons, or is that what what's it called? What are people that, Patreon, the
Oh,
Patreon
Patreon.
account for
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
So I'm sure there's lots of value that could be, because especially Pokemon community in general is very much a herd mentality type of
It
community.
is. It
Yeah.
is.
And they listen to somebody, and now we're all going that direction, then we're shifting this direction. But try for folks listening to go beat to your own drum, or at least a little bit, or at least listen to enough opinions. Let me say it that way, that you actually can balance um, the good from the bad, who's been successful, who isn't, what's the logic behind it, and then formulate your opinions, as opposed to
Mm.
just saying, well, gosh, that person acts like they know something and we know they know something. It doesn't mean they're always right. It does not mean
Mhm.
one person's always right. Otherwise, that's the crystal ball theory. And there wouldn't, I wouldn't need to still, my kids would not have to, they wouldn't live with me anymore. I'd just say, get out.
Well, Dave, it's honestly, it's scary how much on the same wavelength we are. I got to ask you, what's your horoscope?
I'm I think it's called Moonchild or Cancer. So I used to call it
Because
Cancer.
I
I think they changed it to Moonchild. So
because I'm a Sagittarius, so that somewhere in there the stars have to align, because
yeah.
I have reverberated the exact same sentiment on my channel, in that I try to do my best to provide advice that I think is meaningful to people, but at the same time I tell people, do not just follow what I have to say. And that is one of the big reasons why I started this series, was so that people can get a diverse perspective from all across the Pokemon card world, from collectors, investors, um, that can bring forth those different perspectives so that they have a more holistic outlook on how they should proceed, how they should go about their collection, how they should go about investing. Because as you said, there is a very prominent sense of herd mentality here, and very often the herd mentality is surrounded around, well, who is the biggest influencer? And I can tell you that the biggest influencers aren't always the best influence for you when it comes to, these purchasing decisions. So I agree, and I appreciate you saying that as well, because it's so important, and it's something that I think more and more people need to realize, is that much like any other investment out there, much like any other type of purchasing decision, you have to be educated. You need to educate yourself above all else.
And I'll add one last thing to that. And I don't, like to specifically point out negativity, but I think if you're going to educate yourself, you also, as an investor, collector, anything, need to understand, particularly as an investor, that there can be motivations underneath the surface when certain people are advising, because they have the hordes of things, or they have the cards, or they have, the market in certain areas that they want to see moved in a certain direction to their benefit. And that
Hmm.
happens every single day. I have people come
Yeah.
to me every single day and say, Uncle Dave, can you help us, show the world that this person is not really in the best vested interest for people out there. So, I don't really get involved in much of that, but I am well aware of folks that have hordes of different things and are looking to figure out, not necessarily even hordes, could be even a single card or something. And they're
Hmm.
trying to make an argument why that should be the card that everyone is looking for. And sometimes that can be a completely objective analysis, and sometimes that could be a very one-sided. So again,
Hmm.
you're right. Check around, listen to opinions, ask the people you trust. There's people like me who'll answer any question for anyone about anything, just to answer the question. And I'm
Hmm.
glad to do it. And I'm also a person that's not afraid to say, I don't have a clue. I don't know the answer to that, but thank you so much for reaching out. I wish I could help. Maybe I'll put them in a different direction, or say, you know what, best of luck. I just couldn't help on this one. So you have a
For
community
sure.
where people care as well and are trying to make sure people make the best decisions. So leverage expertise in the community, as long as you feel it's objective and not subjective towards one's end.
Hmm. And I can personally vouch for the fact that you are very receptive to people reaching out. You've always been very receptive to me whenever I've reached out to you, whether it was coming on to this podcast, or just questions that I had in general. You are very, very good about that, and I really don't know how you find the time, because I can imagine with your notoriety that you get bombarded with questions, or people reaching out to you. But I can say that from myself, you do a fantastic job of it. Really do.
Thank you, bud. And I told you in the beginning, I really do care, to a fault. And so that's a good thing and a bad thing. If I can't get back to somebody soon enough, it's like I'll come back a week later and say, oh my goodness, I forgot, I was busy. So I care that I want to help people that ask for it. That's what life should be about. Think about all the people that have
Hmm.
helped me along my journey. It's tough to do, but I certainly try.
Hmm. Well, I certainly appreciate it, man, and I know there's a lot of other people out there that do as well. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and jump into our last big aspect here, going into business. So we've talked about the collecting side, the investing side, but there's a lot of people out there that are looking at Pokemon and saying to themselves, "Does this present an opportunity for me to actually maybe make a business, and maybe have a viable pursuit?" So, again, we're talking about the pandemic, and I've seen, and I'm sure you have as well, the pandemic has revealed that the so-called secure jobs out there aren't as secure as they once seemed. To me, one of the big things that I took away from this whole ordeal was that there does seem to be a necessity to create a business for oneself, or at least a side hustle, again, that you can maybe fall back on in hard times. Now, we've seen a lot of small businesses go under throughout the pandemic, which is really unfortunate because as far as GDP, about 45% of GDP is made up of small businesses. So, if people are considering this, they might be asking themselves, is it a viable business for myself? Is it something that can last? So, in your opinion, is creating a business around Pokemon a viable long-term decision?
So I just don't see a downside for creating a Pokemon business or any type of eBay business for sure to start out
Mm,
with. Let's just use that as a kind of an umbrella. I know some people don't like eBay and they would say, well, I'm going to sell on Amazon, I'm going to sell on another platform, but I just don't see a downside to that entire idea. So viability, long term, short term, whatever. I like the concept of a side hustle. I think there's no downside to it, and you just do it. I think you can learn a lot about both buying and selling by being on a platform like eBay. I think that you can learn how to, what customer service really means. I think you can, it gives you a chance to, you get more expertise in the market by having to compare whatever it is you're looking to sell or buy relative to other people. Of course, you're not
mhm,
buying as much, you're looking to sell in the business sense. But all of this becomes data points and expertise that you can put back somewhere else in your life down the road. I think you might use it in a job interview later on and say, hey, I had the entrepreneurship to do this on my own, and I'm dealing with folks across the country, across the world, having conversations that are leading to more in-depth business dealings, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I definitely think it's viable. I think that in some of the videos I've done before on just opening up an eBay business in general, one of the great things about it is you can start extremely small. You can start small in the sense of you can pretty much get it for free, list the first 200 or 50. So I think you get 50 listings for free a month. And then occasionally they'll run promotions to give you 200 free listings. So you don't have to pay to list anything. You can just pay if things are selling the fees, and that's okay. They're completely exorbitant. They're about 13% when you sell. But I always justify them by saying this company has given me an avenue to get to the rest of the world. And it cost me 13% when I sell to get there. Where would I
mhm,
find people in Florida and in New Zealand and wherever that can find my stuff and are willing to buy from me outside of this company in such a way?
mhm.
So yeah, I do think viability is there. I think that there's still ways to differentiate yourself. There are so many people climbing onto the platform these days. If you look at the feedback numbers, half of the folks that are selling stuff look like they have feedbacks of one or two now. So a lot of people are climbing on, and you would think most of those will not maybe make it. I mean, I've had some real difficult dealings with some of the newbies, and they'll kind of fall away. But if you're strategic and follow some basic principles of taking care of customers, you're very honest in the way you describe things, very conservative, and you're also very honest in saying that you want other people to be happy with what it is they're buying from you. People will really get that feeling, and it will begin to differentiate yourself. And the last thing I'll say on this segment until you, because if I don't keep talking, you'll never shut me up, and that's not fair to the audience, or is over time, even the best businesses slip. They slip, and you have a chance to come in. I mean, I want people to see the difference between my business and the biggest businesses out there. Some of the big ones are fantastic, and some are truly horrible. And
Mhm.
I bought a card from a business. I won't say the name because I don't know what's going on there, but there's a business on eBay that has hundreds of thousands of stuff. I haven't ever mentioned their name before. And I just tried to buy a variant card these last 3 or 4 weeks. Something's wrong with that business. All of a sudden, they don't respond. They've sent the wrong card. Then I said it's the wrong card. They sent the same card again. They haven't refunded my money now the second time. So that business for which I've done a ton of transaction in the past, I won't be buying from them again, which means I'm
Mhm.
going to look out to buy from someone else. And other people are going to see that like they've seen with some of the companies I have mentioned. And there's always an opportunity because the barrier to entry, as you and I know the terminology to be, is so small. It's so
Mhm.
easy to get in.
Mhm. Yeah, and the one of the best video series that I have seen on your channel was how to successfully sell Pokemon cards on eBay. And for many people that are just getting into the hobby, that are trying to turn this into a business, that's the first place that they're going to turn to try to sell products is over that platform. And you've already, gone into some of the good tactics that you should employ if you want to be successful on eBay. But maybe if you just go into a little bit greater detail, maybe like your top five best strategies that someone can employ if they want to be able to successfully sell on eBay, as well as some of the mistakes that you see, especially new sellers making.
Sure. So the first thing that came to mind is number one, keep it simple. So when you list things, don't write a book about the item, because what it does is it makes people feel like you're trying to justify that maybe the item isn't perfect in some way. So you're going to write a book about how the condition or the specifics, or you're not responsible for returns, or take it or leave it, that kind of thing. Just be
Hmm.
simple, write the facts that are necessary, and finish it up. The second thing is, don't overstate condition. Make sure you understate or are very accurate in condition. So a lot of people these days won't even state condition. They just say, see the pictures. Well, everybody knows you can't always see the pictures very well. So it shows you that, what are they hiding? Why not talk about the condition? Why not take, if you're going to put anything and be more verbose in how you do it, it's the condition is what people are concerned with if you're not graded at that point. So
Hmm.
you do state, you say, there's light scratches here, there's this. I think most people understand. Some people have an entire library of how they define their conditions, near mint and light play and excellent. But I think that you can generally put some stuff there as long as you're very specific. And as
Hmm.
long as you say, look, I do want you to be happy. And, I think that early on you can take returns on single cards as well, if you're not afraid. They're not too expensive. A lot of folks won't take returns, because I'm dealing with returns that, if people, they're too expensive. People could switch on me. They could do things that could really hurt me in the long run. But offering the opportunity for returns might be a successful strategy too.
Hmm.
So those are the basic things. I think that pictures, if they don't reflect, if they're reflective, show them. And if they're not, say, you know what, the pictures might not be reflective, which is why I might put a line or two saying light scratches on the hollow or not played, those kind of things. But simplicity, accuracy, and then be different. Let people see your personality. Tell them where the cards came from. It came directly out of pack to sleeve. That's all you need to write. Got these in a trade with someone. The lot is going to be some perfect things, some not, but I've priced it where I'm sure you as the buyer will be very happy when you buy this from me. Talk to someone like you'd want to be spoken to, so it engenders a confidence that you know what you're doing. And
Hmm.
of course, accuracy counts. No typos, no misspellings. If you're not great with that stuff personally, have someone help you. Have someone look over your listings, just someone that can read and write maybe a little bit better, because those little inaccuracies are the first thing that people will see, that will show that you're not detailed enough to know, uh, to be accurate in what you're actually going to be selling as well. One
Hmm.
final thing I'll mention, because it comes to mind, is there's a lot of people that just copy other people's listings. Try not to do that, because half of the new folks don't know why they're copying what they're copying.
Hmm.
So, as an example, I'm just going to give an example. I notice a lot of people will copy Troll and Toad stuff because they
Hmm.
have a lot of listings. Well,
Right.
Troll and Toad uses a code at the end of their listings. And I know this because I've dealt with them for years, and they've never told me. I just know it common sense. They put 2B3 or 757. People copy that, not realizing that code's just indicative of different retailers that sell through Troll and Toad and are selling their merchandise through Troll and Toad. It's how they know it's their card or someone else's. Well, somebody
Hmm.
copies 2B3. I know that they're nothing more than just copying. And most of the time, I'm not going to go anywhere near them because they couldn't even create their own listing. They had no idea what they were actually putting out there.
Hmm.
So create your stuff, keep it simple, make sure your listing title is very descriptive, and tell the buyer what you think they should know about you and why you want to ensure that they're going to be happy.
Mm-hmm. And guys, this is all such great information because you know, if you've attempted to try to sell on eBay before, you know that it can be difficult to break into. Sometimes, you know, if your products aren't showing up in search, you know, based upon, you know, some of the mistakes that maybe David had mentioned, then you're just not going to get seen, and you're not going to be able to sell products. So that is all fantastic advice, and something that I think a lot of people will really, really benefit from. And if you want to go into greater detail on that, again, David has a two-part series on his YouTube channel where he dives much deeper into that, and I would highly recommend checking it out. And then on top of that, the only thing that I would add is that, you know, if you're looking to maybe expand upon your business, I think that much as David has done, as I have done, maybe look at jumping on another platform like YouTube. And getting your name out there to a wider audience, because at some point, if you do that, you know, much like myself, I now have a little bit of notoriety, not much, but a little bit, that I'm able to create my own website that I can then sell from. And maybe you might be able to mitigate some of the associated fees that you would have on eBay. But again, as David said, eBay is a great resource, you know, the place that most people go to. And if you do things right, follow his advice, then I think you guys will be well off in that regard. But David, man, this has been an awesome, awesome conversation, my friend. I think you've dropped a lot of great insight, a lot of great knowledge. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. And now I wanna leave you with one thing here. And I know this is a little segment that you have on your YouTube channel that you feature now and then, and that's known as the Pokemon Poetry Corner. I've seen the Pokemon Poetry Corner on several videos. So to thank you for being here today, I went ahead and put together a little poem just for you, just to thank you for coming on. And so you know, hopefully, you know, you and your entourage, you don't gang up on me after this if it's too bad. Pikachu, Psyduck, it's all good, I promise.
You're
So
going to
here
make
we
me
go.
cry. You're going to make me cry. Thanks, buddy. Okay, here we go.
So many might be cursing out of envy of David Person. His collection is like none other when it comes to shiny cardboard covers. But this pales in its capacity to the scale of his generosity. And if it's wisdom you wish to know, to Uncle Dave you go. So here is my thanks to you for doing this interview. I couldn't imagine much better than speaking with the world's number one Pokemon cards collector. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, buddy. That's fantastic. I really appreciate it. Very kind of you to have me on. Very kind to take the time to write the poem. Anything I can do to help you as you move forward with your budding career in this whole thing, I'm glad to do, of course. And the same goes for all of your audience. You mentioned the eBay sites. I've always said in my two videos, anybody that wants me to review a listing or two, give them a tip or two to help. All they got to do is reach out, and I'm glad to do it. And then you talked about the website as well. The one thing I've been able to do, and I say if I can do it, if 60-year-old Uncle Dave can create his own website in June and it's up and running and I've got nice concentrated attention from some buyers that trust me, I could certainly lead people in that direction if they'd like to do that for themselves as well. So anything that I can do to be a resource to the community, I'm always glad to do. It's been fun just to have a whole bunch of new friends like you that for a reclusive guy like me, that means the world. And so I thank you for all that you're doing and will continue to do for the hobby and for having me on today.
Well, it's much appreciated, Dave. And if just for people that may not be familiar with you yet, or may not know where to find you, where can they? What are your different platforms?
Yeah, so I have so on Instagram I'm at sign D Persin Persin 1, and then of course I have the new website which is David Pokey Person. So David, then POKE, Persin, PERSIN,
Hmm.
.com. And then YouTube, you just look up David Person Pokemon, and it's out there with the videos and everything. So, and then of course, in all of my YouTube videos, there's the descriptions of all of the ways that I can be reached as well, email addresses and things like that. So thank you for asking.
Excellent. Yes, of course. And I'll be sure to link all of that up down in the video description for this episode, as well as on all of the podcasting platforms as well. But again, David, thank you so much for being here today, my friend. Truly, truly appreciate it. You are an absolute pillar of the community and a wonderful resource for all of us to have. So, again, thank you so much for being here today. And, guys, that is going to do it. And we will see you next time right here on the Pokemon Masterclass series. Take care, everybody.